All right. So my name is Bianca, and for those of you who don't know me yet, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mentally Fit alongside Dan, who I'm sure most of you do know. And if you're new to the community, we're really happy you're here, and I want to personally welcome you to the Mentally Fit family. If you are watching live on Facebook right now, please let us know where you're watching from. What city are you in? Drop it in the chat. I always love seeing where you guys are from. And if you have any questions during the talk, please comment them because we will be doing a Q&A with our speaker, Sara, at the end of the talk. So please keep the comments and the questions coming throughout the hour. Let me just check now if there are any comments. Let us know if you can see us okay, if you can hear us okay. All right. So today's talk is something that I really believe in just because of my personal experience with it. So of course I am biased, but like so many others in the world, last year was really, really hard for me. I started dealing with anxiety at a level that I've never, ever experienced before. And as it got worse, I started having physical somatic symptoms. And these symptoms made it impossible for me to sleep at night or to work and be productive during the day. And I tried so many things to get it under control, but it just kept getting worse. And the thing about somatic symptoms and physical symptoms is that they really compound anxiety, which truly sucks. So for those of you who are a part of the Therapist Book Club, you know that we read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk last year. So if you're in the book club and you have been in the book club since last year and you read that book with us, type yes in the chat. If you read it on your own, type yes in the chat. I'd love to know who has read that book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And I just want to share a quick quote from the book with you guys that as it relates to just my personal story and my experience with anxiety and trauma. So it says, this was on page 97, traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. The past is alive in the form of gnawing interior discomfort. Their bodies are constantly bombarded by visceral warning signs. And in an attempt to control these processes, they often become expert at ignoring their gut feelings and in numbing awareness of what is played out inside. They learn to hide from themselves. So that is from page 97 from The Body Keeps the Score. Again, type yes in the chat if you've read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It's a really, really, really amazing book. That quote really rings true for me, and I know a lot of people can relate. Gnawing interior discomfort definitely describes what I was feeling for a really long time last year. And what I learned from Bessel is that the body keeps the score, right? And I know that now. And this is something that Sara Pierce, our lovely speaker today, has helped me come to understand on a much deeper level. I came to Sara at my wit's end in tears, seeking help. Talk therapy has been really helpful for me, but I needed help with the mind-body integration to really get control of those somatic symptoms that I was experiencing. And Sara taught me about presence and healing, which is an integrated healing art form where we learn holistic mindfulness through consciousness. Essentially, she helped me become more aware of my somatic body experience and get to the root of what was causing the anxiety and the symptoms associated. So without further ado, I want to introduce Sara Pierce. And let me just share my screen. We have a slide that we want to share to help you guys get a better understanding of what we'll be talking about today. So without further ado, Sara Pierce.
Thank you, Bianca. You're just awesome. It's so great to share, to be able to do this with you and for bringing people together to understand more about how to treat holistically, and presence and healing is one way to do this. So I'm going to start with this slide that we have up here. And we know that whenever we go to try to describe self, that larger self of who we are as humans, and we begin to have to separate things. and it's fairly artificial, but we and Presence and Healing think of body, mind, energy, emotion, and spirit as being different levels of consciousness. And by separating them out a little bit, we can come to understand not only what these levels of consciousness are about, but also how they relate to one another. So the body is self-evident, that's the physical body. And the mind is not the brain. The brain is part of the physical body. The mind is actually separate. It doesn't have a home in our body. As any of us know, when all of a sudden a random thought will come into our head and we go, wow, where did that come from? That didn't come from your brain. It came from around you or of your gut, a gut feeling or sudden instincts. Again, not from the brain as we think of it. Energy, that circle of energy there, is a level of consciousness that refers to what we see in science of the mitochondria in our cells are creating energy all the time and we're moving, and also the neurological, electrochemical connections that we have throughout our body and how they flow. But also when we look at other perspectives from, say, Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, that tells us about the energy flows through meridians and chakras in our system and the energies around our body. The emotional level of consciousness is separated out also just to remind us of the importance of emotions. And spirit, by that we don't mean religion. What we mean is all the beliefs and attitudes and therefore ways that we walk in the world with our spiritual aspects, which is different for everybody. So as we've said already, Presence and Healing is an integrative healing art form used for personal growth and healing. It includes mindfulness training, these 4 parts: mindfulness training to bring awareness to one's inner environment across all those levels of consciousness, and including our state, how we feel about ourselves inside. So, for example, how we feel inside is very different if we're having a very joyful, happy day, and is a different kind of state that we can describe if we're paying attention to it, if we're having a sad day. We also use perceptual awareness and skills of perceptual awareness, which essentially is a sensory learning style approach, so that we all have different ways of taking in the world which we prefer. Some of us are more visual, some of us are more auditory, some of us are more kinesthetic, or we're more aware of how we move and how we touch and feel things. All that work by, I think Howard Gardner is his first name, Gardner is his last name for sure, who taught us about learning styles. The third is the naming of the experience. So when we're working with people, we want to help them bring in their mental body and so that to describe the experience they're having. I'm sure as mental health practitioners, you all know plenty of people who suddenly lose their words as soon as there's an emotion in the room. And the fourth is particularly in regard to what we're talking about today, the skills of pendulating, which comes from Peter Levine's work. He coined that phrase anyways, I believe, to increase awareness of safety and developing self-trust to explore one's inner environment. That I think is really important when we're dealing with trauma. The touch component that Presence and Healing brings helps to bring more information to the client. Proprioceptive touch is the depth of touch that we use with somebody. So proprioception, the receptor, is all about knowing where we are in space when our eyes are closed. That's how we're using our proprioceptive sense in order to do that, and the vestibular sense to a lesser degree. Proprioceptive touch is relaxing. It subjectively reduces anxiety, and it increases dopamine and serotonin levels, which are important from a brain perspective. We also use occupied touch, which is having the subtle energy of your body be in congruence with your physical self. And from this, we're talking about this is the person that's the toucher. So really having energy and physical structure match one another. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So ultimately, what we're using is informed touch. And informed touch assesses the appropriate degree of proprioception, that how hard do I push feeling, and a sense of the whole body in its parts as they relate to each other. Whether they're more in sync, all these parts are in synchrony with one another, whether they move together, and especially you're monitoring the state of the nervous system. So a presence and healing practitioner brings all this into their touch with people, which is, I believe, quite necessary for stress, trauma, and anxiety. And in some sessions, presence and healing also includes movement, which is used to integrate information and also to provide more insight for a client. Following the polyvagal theory and the triune brain research, we use a bottom-up and top-down approach. And this is especially important, again, for trauma and anxiety and stress as well, but especially trauma and anxiety. And I guess the best way to put this is, for the person who's using informed touch from presence and healing, we're mostly doing touch work with some conversation is the way I think of it. While that's going on, I think it's also very important for people to have more top-down approaches like mental health therapies involved at the same time, because the skill set, for one thing, for the practitioners is quite different, but also we want safety. The safety is the most important thing, and we need the mind to be in agreement with what we're experiencing, because that's part of the issue in trauma, is the mind, and anxiety as well. The mind is not in agreement with the felt experience. Movement, touch, and interoception, the sense of how we feel inside ourselves or the internal condition of ourselves, are all used in this bottom-up approach. Let's see. So here are some definitions for today for what we're going to call stress, trauma, and anxiety. So stress is our internal response and reaction to an experience that our brain, neurology, perceives as threatening or challenging. Trauma is our reaction to an experience that overwhelms the internal experience in which we feel powerless. And anxiety is a nervous disorder characterized by a state of excessive uneasiness and apprehension. These are pretty simplistic and broad explanations for what to describe these. But what they all have in common is an absence of awareness and comfort in present time. And there's only one part of us that is consistently in present time, and that's our physical body. The rest of us, all over the place. My mind is in the future, back in the past, without me even knowing about it. I'm sure everyone can relate to that. So with informed touch, we primarily, or at first, with these conditions, address this need for a person to become more consciously aware and develop the skills of becoming more present and in present time awareness. what this requires is the practitioner has the ability to be in present time awareness and have an awareness of what we call occupied touch, which means the congruence between the energetics in your body and physicality. So you can try this if you wish. So if you just take your hand and reach towards something, just reach towards something and note how far you go. The next time, what I want you to do is to remember that part of your arm is your shoulder blade. And so this time, include your shoulder blade while you reach in the same direction. Now come back one more time. And this time I want you to imagine that when you reach, you have energy coming up your arm, up your body, and then down your arm and all the way out through your fingertips, and then you reach. Typically what happens, or what you'll notice, is that when you first reached, it wasn't as far as your second reach. We would call that including more of yourself. You decided to use more of your physical body instead of just your arm to reach. The third time, you may have reached even further because now you had congruence between your energy and your structure, your physical structure, so that you reached even further. So that's an example of energetic and physical congruence. So from here, then we begin to discern the safest approach to touch someone. In Presence and Healing, unless somebody's licensed as a massage therapist, I would say everyone starts or always works with clothes on. And then we begin to pay attention to the degree of proprioception that we're going to offer to a person with our hands. The hands-on person is feeling into the autonomic nervous system and assessing at all times the degree of stress or activity in the autonomic nervous system, meaning and the easier part to feel is really the nervous anxiety more than the calmness, but you can feel for both once you've developed those skills. Typically what happens for the stressed out person, proprioception or the deep touch feels really good. They love it. It's used as a treatment for children with autism for just that reason. People who have experience of trauma often have little awareness of safety. And so there's a certain amount of negotiation to help them learn what is safety or what's good enough safety so that they can get inside their body again, because oftentimes people with trauma have a significant amount of out-of-body experience in their lives, so that it's difficult for them to re-enter. And so this is a way for them to safely re-enter and develop for themselves the skills to know when they want, an appreciation for their strategy to leave and to be able to come back, to leave and be able to come back, or to be able to stay in a little bit longer, or go a little deeper. But it's a negotiation and becomes a relationship with safety for them. The person with anxiety oftentimes really appreciates some degree of proprioception, deep pressure, when you can get your hands on. But what's so difficult for people with anxiety is actually the approach, where before your hand gets on the body, they're already anxious and they feel more anxiety as you get closer. So a skilled therapist or a skilled presence and healing practitioner will find a way to help them feel safe as they approach touching the body. That would be informed touch. So ultimately what this does is it's a repatterning of the nervous system so that we can establish safe boundaries and befriend or create a relationship with internal safety, which sets up for those people who are interested an awareness of the parts of our internal selves, which can be really useful. There's also an increased awareness of present time, which, remember, we're trying to really to grasp more. We're all, as much as many of us might practice meditation or being more in present time with ourselves, it's always a study. It's not something that I think any of us stay permanently in present time, though our body always does, but the rest of us maybe not so much. All of these are building tools of resilience, which is ultimately also what we're seeking for people, is to have greater resilience, therefore less stress, which is a trigger for trauma and for anxiety. It also gives people an opportunity for practicing expanding all of this by attending to their internal state, and ultimately to become functionally able to pay attention to their internal state throughout their day so that they know how to meet their own needs. And the other thing, especially because of the pendulating, there's an opportunity to become more comfortable with challenges. And in this way, with these skills, they can explore more deeply and into developmental or functional issues that can be addressed with the support of the rest of their mental health team. For myself personally, and for I think in general in presence and healing, the goal for me is to move them from a discovery about what they're experiencing in their lives, and then to move into recovery from that, which means, as you know, a form of a change in self-ideation to say, I am Sarah, I am a fill in the blank. And then from that, after spending time in recovery and really making friends and working that, they can move more into wellness, which from my perspective anyways, and from a more holistic perspective, would mean you self-identify as your greater self, and you happen to sometimes have fill in the blank condition. So ultimately, this is a path of developing greater self-trust mindfully through the body. With, as I said, additional support from the whole team that we have in life, including people who are, like you, are working with the mental health aspects. So that, in brief, is what presence and healing is about for this population. It's been a real pleasure to connect with you all, and I really thank you, Bianca, for setting this up.
Thank you. I was really excited to just share you with our community, just because, you know, it was definitely an integral part of my ongoing recovery to work with you. And one of the questions that I actually have is, when you talk about informed touch, for people who, you know, may still not fully understand what that means, can you describe what informed touch looks like in a presence and healing session? So I know, like, for me, there was, I think, maybe some acupressure or something. Like, I am not good at explaining it,
Yep.
but can you kind of like give everyone like a picture of what does that look like?
So it's obviously going to look different for each client. Mm-hmm. And some of the parameters are that, first off and foremost, I need to be in present time and aware. I, as a practitioner, need to be fully in the moment so that I can be in your moment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're off in different time zones. Mm-hmm. So what that means is then from there, before I even put my hands on someone, I'm going to be assessing how safe do they feel? How comfortable are they? and what is the best entry for me as the person who's doing the touching? What's the best entry to help them to not have to employ their strategies of leaving their body or eliciting their minds, things like that. That's not to say that those strategies aren't valid. So, for example, many people, it's more comfortable because they're not really occupied in their feet. They're not aware of their feet most of the time. Lots of us aren't aware of our feet most of the time. So for me, if I have someone on the table, the easiest place for me to start might be their feet because they're not there. Mm-hmm. And then once I stay there long enough and don't really move or wiggle a toe, they go, oh, this is okay. So they become more aware because I'm applying some pressure to their toes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So you mentioned like some skills and moving people from discovery to recovery. Is there one specific skill, actionable skill that you would be able to share for someone like me after discovering like, okay, this is the cause of my anxiety, or this is the trauma that's causing this, discomfort in my body? Is there one skill that you could share with everyone that you've shared with people?
I think the one skill is really from 12-step programming, which is to say, whatever I experienced, right, claiming that, right? So it's really, to move into recovery is to claim that this too is a part of me. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm working in a session, or we're working in a session, and you have an experience of, oh, I have this pain, then, or, oh, I have this diagnosis and I have this pain, but it becomes more real for you, then you can state that as, my name is Sara, and I am this. And that's the first step into recovery. From my perspective, that's the first step.
Perfect. And I know that you have some trainings, some exciting trainings coming up. Can you tell us a little bit more if people want to learn more about presence and healing and the different methods that you have? How can they get signed up? Where can they learn more from you?
Absolutely. I think I don't know if I sent you or not the registration information for this, which is through Children, Families, and Communities. Did I send that?
I think you did. I can share that with everybody.
And if not, we could put it in. Maybe we can put it in the chat or something.
Yes.
So this is 4 times a year. Presence and Healing does what we call Grace Weeks. The focus is on grace. And this year in California for our spring event is Resilience to Renewal. So this is mostly put on by the practitioners who are in California. That's going from March 17th to the 22nd. And we have a variety of things going on. It's all virtual this year because of COVID. Mm-hmm. We have sessions going on Wednesday and Thursday, and I think Monday. But in classes, some great classes. We have Moving from the Core, taught by Marilyn Graham. We have one for those who really want to get a greater sense of the brain-body connection. Medulla, the gateway between brain and body, taught by Sally Turgle. We have some sound meditations as a different kind of introduction to getting inside your body going on, and a 2-part virtual class, which is the big class, which is Moving in New Directions, Resilience and Renewal, taught by Carol Mudge and Carla Lukens and Faith Perkins. And then I'm teaching a class that is called Trauma Resilience, Finding Safety in the Shadows, on Sunday, March 21st.
Nice. That's amazing. So I'll definitely...
One more. There's Your Heart is With You Always, taught by Amy Young.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll definitely share that link in the comments. And for anybody who's interested in signing up, we will definitely share that. And can you just share your website one more time of where people can find more information about you and learning from you?
The best place to go probably at this point is www.cfcommunities.org.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. That was a really great presentation. Thank you for sharing the presence and healing modality with everyone. And to those of you who are watching, I will drop that link, cfcommunities.org. If you are interested in learning in their upcoming trainings, we will share the direct link to register for that as well. And as always, thank you, Sara Pierce, for coming in, and thank you to the community for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you, Bianca. I really had a great time. Appreciate it.